BI to the next level. I'm Ed Watson. I'm a Microsoft MVP. I'm a consultant for Improving Atlanta. We're a firm, a national firm, but we have an office in Atlanta. That's where I'm based out of. This is my contact information on LinkedIn and Twitter. My email at Improving is ed.watson@improving.com. Feel free to send me any questions you have after this, anything you want to talk about that was part of today's session. I'd be glad to follow up with you. Let's take a look at our agenda. Today we're going to talk about land use planning. The devil is in the details. And color is more than a reflection of light. These are some fun topics we're going to get into. Let's start off with land use planning. So with Power BI and other reporting tools, we have a limited canvas. This is often referred to as real estate, and therefore when you build a Power BI report, you essentially are a land use planner. If you're not familiar with this job, the planner, someone who looks at population, traffic, the environment, and many other factors to determine how to use parcels of land for development. They are the people that, say no to putting a chemical plant in the middle of a suburban neighborhood. Now, if you're like me, I live in Atlanta. We are not really familiar with it because it feels like most times land planners in our area just kind of throw things everywhere. But imagine that Power BI reports are your real estate, and you have to decide where to put everything. So let's don't put a chemical plant in the middle of a residential neighborhood. How do we do that? Let's start with math. Why? Because I love math. So every standard Power BI report uses a 16:9 aspect ratio, which is also known as high definition or HD. So that's right. Power BI is using the HDTV layout format for a 21st century aspect ratio. So what does that mean to you? That means essentially that every screen is 1280 pixels by 720 pixels. Now, we can change that, but any other configuration that we do is going to be smaller. So there's really no need to do that. We want the most real estate that we can get. So if you see, we're going to not use PowerPoint today. We're going to use Power BI itself to demonstrate as we go. So if you want to see this in action, we'll go to the little paintbrush, see the page size. Notice our 16:9, that's default. We could use a couple of other ones, but here's where our 1280 by 720. So this number is very important to us because it gives us the neighborhood. Where are we going to put the houses? We know that they can't be any bigger than this, obviously, but how do we divide that up? We use math because we love math, right? So here's a sample report. And picture these blue shaded areas as in this example, this is 4 houses and a road. So we have them laid out using math to divide the areas to give us some equal areas and to make things neat and orderly. So generally I see when people do Power BI, they just kind of grab some visuals, drop them out there and kind of eyeball it. I'm against that. I think that knowing that you're 1280 by 720, you should use a little math and divide these up ahead of time. So in this example, we know that we have 4 visuals we want to represent on the screen. Okay, I could do those with 2 rows of 2. Now I want these to be same size, laid out, visually appealing. So I know that I have 720 pixels. So as you see in the example, I could do 2 visuals high of 300 each. That leaves me with 10 pixels in between. That leaves me room for a 90 pixel high border. And this is laid out so that we don't have a lot of misconfiguration and discombobulation. What we want when your brain processes a report, it naturally is drawn to things that are off psychologically. In order for this to be an effective report, we want people to look at the report and process the information and process the story, not necessarily spend time trying to figure out why these two visuals are different sizes, why they don't look like they're lined up properly. Those are things that your brain is naturally drawn to, and they are ineffective for visuals. So we want to take care of that ahead of time and do a little planning and know that our math is correct and we've got this laid out. It's so much easier, to drop our visuals out here, highlight the visual, go to the general tab, and put in our dimensions, because we've used math to figure out our layout of our palette, our neighborhood. So I hope this makes sense. I see a lot of times with clients that, like, the top row is a little bit smaller than the bottom row. And when you ask, they're not really sure. It just kind of fit in there. That's not how we want to lay out our neighborhood. We want to take the time, take our report to the next level, and come up with these dimensions and try to make it look good. Now, this is just one example. We know we have 4 visuals here. So let's say that they wanted 3 visuals on the bottom row. Well, we would just divide that mathematically. Our top 2 would still be the same 300 pixels high by 625 wide. And notice it's centered and symmetrical. Well, our bottom row will just be 3 visuals equally sized, taking up the same space with the same amount of space in between. So I'm not saying every report you do has to be 4 visuals with a border on the top. Hello, kitty. Sorry about that. But what I'm saying is, this is a good layout and a good layout to follow. And psychologically, your brain can generally process 7 data points before you reach a cognitive overload. So we've all seen those reports that have 15, 20 visuals on them, and it's just not appealing. It is too much for our brain to process. It is cognitive overload. So we want to stick to 7. Here we have our 4 visuals. And that leaves room at the top for, let's say, 3 cards with a KPI on them. So we stay in that range. Does that make sense? Everybody good with that? So let's take a look at a sample. Sorry. So we're going to go, this is a sales metrics report. This is the free Microsoft sample data worldwide importers. It's available for download. It's a sample company, and you can use that to demonstrate your data. So it's very similar to your company, has sales, purchasing, etc. So this report, notice we've taken those same dimensions. Everything is laid out symmetrically and even, but it still looks a little off, right? Well, that's these 3 cards up here. Remember, we stick with our 7 visuals. So we have that here, but this doesn't seem very symmetrically laid out or evenly laid out. So what I'm going to show you is, I've showed you how to put in the dimensions and lay these out. Let's look at a simpler way. Once we have our boundaries here, we can click on this one and this total customer card. And let me make the bigger menu so you can see that. So what we're going to do, we have those 2 selected. We're going to align them on the right side. So now I know they're even. But that leaves a little bit of a hole here. So if we had 4 cards, those would probably fit in there evenly. But remember, we're trying to stay within the 7, so we want to grab all 3 of them. And Power BI has this distribute horizontally feature. Now we know they're symmetrical on that right side of the page. So everything is now balanced and flowing and visually effective, right? So we've upgraded this, but it still doesn't look done. It still doesn't look like it's ready to present. Notice total sales. That probably should have a $sign, right? This is a report going to the CEO. We want it to be good and polished. Well, as it is right now, this is just a count, a sum of our sales. So I've taken the liberty ahead of time and written a DAX measure that does the same thing a little bit differently than just this aggregation that's built into Power BI. Notice I put the sales amount from the sales table, and it's doing a sum for me. Well, I don't get all the nice formatting. So if I use a DAX measure and drop that in there, now I get the formatting because I've set that measure ahead of time. So I've enhanced my visual a little bit more. Notice I did it ahead of time here with the percentage. We want this, it's the little details that we really want to accentuate here. It's not just throwing the data on a screen and saying, here you go, here's a couple of bar charts and a couple of pie charts, you're good. Part of the problem as data developers is that we deal with data. We write queries, we do things of that nature. So we are not UI UX experts. We are not visually trained usually. I know I don't have a fine arts in the visual arts or a master's in the visual arts. So these things don't come easy for us, for data people, naturally. As a consultant, I've seen a lot of, it's kind of like a baby photo. When you go to work and someone says, hey, look at my baby. And you're like, whoa, yeah, that's a baby. It's kind of hard to, tell them that it's ugly. But a lot of reports are really ugly, but people are very proud of them because they developed them. So it's really hard to say, let's make these better. So I tried to figure out exactly why I was seeing so many bad reports. So hopefully this takes you to the next level, and hopefully these techniques will help you to build visually effective reports. So let's see what else here. Notice that I've used a color scheme. How we do that, a color theme in Power BI, but it's color scheme. So I've used it's called Storm. Worldwide Importers has a blue, dark blue, and white corporate color scheme. So this theme that's available inside of Power BI has those similar colors. I want to follow that so that it looks cohesive. Notice everything looks connected. Everything is in kind of the blue and color scheme there. So it all looks part of the company, but it all looks connected. We don't see orange, purple, green, yellow, black, red. Those are disjointed. We want everything. This is our salespeople, our sales divisions. We want them to look uniform and visually effective. I don't need to try and figure out why Sophia is green, but Lily is red. Okay. So we want this. Notice the blue goes throughout. We have the titles of each of the visuals are in blue. The card data is also in blue. So we want to use these themes to give us a more effective report. Also, so let's say this is a sales report. We have other sales reports that we've written. We want those to look similar. We want them to follow the same theme. If you have two different developers, you don't want one sales report to have reds and oranges and another one to be blue. If you're serving these up to a sales department and they're looking at all the reports, you need to build a standard and use a theme to help enforce that, where you can set all of your font sizes. See if we look at this. We can customize a lot of different things here and make sure that we're following that corporate standard for all of our text, our visuals, etc. So we know when our developers use these themes that they're following the same standard. So everything looks uniform. That is next level stuff. I see a lot of reports that they're similar. They're all accounting reports, but they're different font sizes, different colors, and it looks like a hodgepodge. It looks very amateur. So we need to take that to the next level. So another thing to note, I see a lot of, is the overuse of visuals. We try so hard to stick to that 7 data point limit. And it's hard when you're developing this, because I know the company says we need 10 visuals. Well, there are ways to get around that to make it visually effective, and we'll go into that in the next section. But you really kind of need to stick to that because of cognitive overload that we've talked about. We want this report to be effective and tell a story, not just how much data can we throw onto a report to get it out the door and hand it off. So you need to think in terms that a CEO is going to see this report and he's going to have it on a projector in a boardroom where not everyone is the same distance from the screen, but you want everyone to be able to read that report. And if you're putting 10 visuals in one page, those visuals get smaller and smaller. Remember, limited real estate, 1280 by 720. We have to make them smaller to fit them in. So it's basically ineffective in the boardroom. You're not going to be able to see it, right? So I hope that makes sense. Let's move on to the next report. This is purchasing metrics. Notice same theme, same colors, it's uniform. But do you notice anything different about this one than the last one? Notice the squares. So while I'm here, I also want to mention, notice the light gray background. One thing I see a lot out in the real world, white backgrounds with black boxes, dark blue boxes around every visual. Psychologically, that says these are distinct and separate and they do not touch each other. It's kind of like the fence in your neighborhood. You know, we go back to the land use planning analogy. Every fence in a neighborhood says, this is my yard, stay out. You don't belong here, this is mine. Well, the nature of Power BI itself is this is an interactive canvas. And by default, all of these things are related to each other. So if I click, for example, on Hudson, notice the other visuals change. It's interactive. They're all connected. I don't need black boxes to separate these and delineate them as separate and distinct entities. The separate and distinct entity is the report, and it's all interactive. So what we want to do is do like a light gray, a very subtle background color, and then use white or a little bit lighter color for your visuals. So there's that natural border as a subtle border that doesn't disrupt the connectedness of the report, the visually effectiveness. So I mentioned that to show you When we go over to the purchasing metrics, notice these are kind of next level. These have rounded corners. It's a little detail, doesn't have to be used on every report, but not a lot of people know that you can do this in Power BI. They just, put the visuals down here, like on sales metrics, and leave it as the squares. This might be an option for you. It might be visually more appealing to have these rounded corners. So I'm going to show you how to do that. What we want to do, go to our paintbrush, go to borders, and remember I said we don't want to use a dark border, but let's use a subtle gray that's just a little bit darker, or maybe even the same color as the background. And give it a radius. The radius says this is going to be a rounded corner. I can change the size, but I really need to make sure with each of my visuals that have a white background that I use the same 20 pixel radius. Now, if I think these are too rounded, I could go smaller. Okay, it's however you want, but if I have multiple pages in this report, I need them to be uniform and look like each other. So in this example, my report is not complete because my sales metrics are squares, my purchasing metrics are rounded. So we would need to take care of that before we publish this. Also notice this is an area that I see a lot. When you're developing, you have a small amount of data, you just kind of put total purchases up there at the top. It's 300, looks good, let's check it in, publish it. Well, as the company grows and as the data grows, this gets to be a much bigger number. Looks a little unprofessional without the comma. So the same thing we did before, I took the liberty of creating a DAX measure, total purchases. Notice also, like right now I'm using purchasing key, and it does the aggregation for me, it does the count, which is fine, but it doesn't give me the formatting. And also I have to change the name. Because I'm using purchasing key, I have to change it to total purchases. If I create a DAX measure, I can name that total purchases and just drop it in there. Now I've got the formatting. Now I've got the comma. So another thing that I see a lot, and this looks good, we like it, but we don't really understand all of our data. And we have situations like this. Someone picks steel gray as a color in the slicer. And before, kind of skipped ahead there. Let's see. So if we go back, put that back the way it was, we get blank. I see this a lot in scenarios where this is in production. And sometimes there's 3 or 4 cards out here. And if there's a scenario that you're filtering by that should be 0, it comes up blank. This is an easy next level win for your reports. In that formula we had, the DAX formula, it's just a little bit more work to add this is blank section right here. What it says is if our count is blank, meaning there's no data, no rows, put a 0. If there are rows, then do the count. This takes 2 seconds to add that in there, but it takes it to the next level. It's a little detail, just like all these other little details that set your reports apart from others. So let's go back. Let's take that off. Another thing I want to point out is this matrix table. Not a lot of people are aware of this. If we had a regular table, it would look like that. Notice we have a lot of duplicate entries. If we use the matrix table, we have these little plus and minus buttons to interact with this table. And we also have subtotals and grand totals. And so we could slice and dice this in the table using this hierarchy over here that we've set up. to show in an interactive fashion our data points. Now, this is really great for accounting reports where we're looking at a lot of detail and maybe we're growing and shrinking this table as we go and seeing totals by different columns, but we want to also see grand totals, etc. This is a much powerful table than the regular straight up table. So we can also, and same as the other table, we can drill down, drill up, go through our hierarchy, and it becomes much more interactive as a visual. I'm going to show you in the next part how to drill through. So we have drill up and drill down to go through the levels of our hierarchy, but we also have drill through. Now, where we want to use the drill through is, let's say we have 4 columns, and it's good enough for this table. Maybe it's good enough for the CEO, but someone else wants to see more detail. We want them to click drill through and either take them to another report with more data. Maybe we have this is a summary and we want to show the detail report underneath there. So it's a nice little feature. So what I've done, I have 2 Power BI files here. So they're 2 different data sets. I didn't want to mix them together. So we're going to go to part 2 because that would have made the report a little slower. 2 different data sets. So now we're going to close that one and go to the second one. So this is a report. This gentleman on the right-hand corner, Data Chant, that's his blog. He put this out a few weeks ago. This is publicly available COVID-19 data from Johns Hopkins that he built a Power BI report. This is not a knock on him. I just want to show this is what it's like when you work at a company and you have a report that you've inherited and you want to take it to the next level. So once again, he does great work and puts out this, but I thought it would be a good example to demonstrate some of the things that we're talking about today, taking it to the next level. So his report, notice we have a lot of data. There are 13 different data points on here. And he's trying to fit everything in the page and give you as much data as possible. This is like a real report that we deal with in real life, in our everyday business world. We want to take that and make it a little bit less of a cognitive overload and make it a little bit more visually appealing. So first thing, let's talk about, notice he's got 4 data points here. It's kind of an L-shaped. It's not cohesive. It really, because these are all different aggregations, we kind of want that to be on one line, to be uniform, especially since there's 4 of them. So it looks out of place to have like 3 on the bottom, 1 on the top. And then we have these 2 graphs that aren't labeled. So I don't know, my brain, when I'm processing this, I don't know, is this related to this or to that? If we hover over it, we could see it's daily new cases. Oh, it's related to the number below it. So we, as intelligent consumers of the report, can figure it out. But a visually effective report is one that you don't have to think a lot about. Everything is easy to process and understand quickly. So we made this next level report to show the differences. So we're going to flip over to that. Now we have 4 in a row. Gives us a little bit more room on our table below it. And it looks a little better just by nature of the fact that those 4 are lined up and there's no graphs that don't look out of place. You know what I'm saying? Notice also, didn't really have a theme. He had the nice little picture there and a little bit of maroon here and there, but it was kind of mixed bag. I took that and made a maroon theme. And so it's tied together a little better with those colors. Also, I took his two graphs and I made 4 of them. I made one for each one of these, and they're tooltip reports. So when we hover over them, they're out of sight. If we only consume this and look at it once and then move on, we don't know it's there, but we have more data and it doesn't cause us overload. If we're looking for more information, we can hover over it and see, here's the trend of confirmations. Here's the trend of deaths. So I've taken those 2 that he had over here for these 2 cards, and I've added 2 more for these. So notice this takes up like the upper left-hand quadrant. So now we've minimized that space there, and it's a little more cohesive. We have a straight line and we have more data points, but without overloading your brain. Make sense? Also, he had a darker red here. Notice how it clashes with the font text when, with the black and the red, they're not complementary. They're clashing here. So I picked a lighter color. This is a great way to do a table. This is easy to do. I can show you that real quick. It's conditional formatting. So if we go to the actual column, it's called data bars, and we can set that up, positive and negative colors, direction, etc. That's a next level detail. He had that in the original report, and we just toned down his color a little bit so it doesn't become overwhelming. So this is a small detail. A lot of people don't like to do tables inside the report because it's like an Excel spreadsheet. We want pretty visuals. So here we go. Now we have a table with visuals. So next level detail. Notice when we go back, he had 6 charts here. If we use the CEO test that I mentioned earlier, and we go back into the boardroom and we're in the back of the boardroom, this is kind of hard to read. These are small, right? Makes sense? So what I've done is I've created some bookmarks. Bookmarks allow Power BI to have a little bit of programmatic features. So what it allows me to do, in this case, I can hide and show different visuals on the same page. So here we're going to come in with confirmed cases. So total confirmed by date and total confirmed, just like he had over here, these top 2. Well, because these on the same level are all tied to each other, I could separate them. So I have confirmed. They're much bigger. They're easier to read. And now we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. There's our 7. We have our 7 visuals. And it looks more appealing, I think. It looks great in this format. We've taken his hard work and we've taken it to the next level. So with the bookmarks, let me show you this. You can, bookmarks are up here on the view menu. And you need to use this bookmark tab with the selection tab. So notice the eyeball and the eyeball with the slash. That is viewing and hidden. So in this case, we have a confirmed button. Notice when I highlighted over it, it has a different color. Also, when I select it, it has a different color. That's almost like, .NET Windows programming a little bit. We get a button. We get different states on hover, on press. We can set different colors in our theme. So I know when I'm hovering over this button, it turns black. That's by design. That's next level. But these buttons, the action here is a bookmark that I've saved off called Global Confirmed. So I can hide and show different visuals, save them off as a bookmark, and then use these buttons to change my screen to match those bookmarks. So if I click on New Cases, you notice the confirmed visuals, which I've grouped here, which makes this a little easier. Notice the eyeball with the slash through it, they're not shown. If I unclick that, they're kind of hiding behind those other two, but let's make it clean. Notice New Cases, those are these two visuals grouped together. Daily new cases and daily number of cases, they're showing. There's the eyeball. So I hope that makes sense. We have 6 different visuals that we're now showing 2 at a time with 3 buttons. So notice another thing I did over here is with deaths. That seems like an important visual to me. I added a forecasting feature. So right now we're at roughly 270,000 deaths. Where's that going to go? I can forecast that here on this visual by clicking Analytics, click the visual, Analytics. Look at all these different options: trend line, constant line, average line. I added a forecast, and that's a next level feature. I have just taken that graph and added some analytics to it. It's kind of cool. It sets it apart. Next level. I know I keep saying that, but I want to drive that home. So another thing I wanted to show you. So in his report, he had, when you hovered over a space on the table, we got a tooltip report. It's very nice. However, one thing he didn't do, see, he has this tooltip tab. These reports are so easy to create. But what you want to do, you want to hide these. You don't want the user to click on your tab and see the tooltip. So when you deploy this into the Power BI service or Power BI report server, you want this to be hidden. You only want to see the tabs that you want the user to go to. So, and just while I'm in here, I can show you. Remember, we talked about the 16:9 ratio. This report has a tooltip type, 320 pixels by 240, much smaller. So when we set that, we set the page to tooltip, and then on page information, we have to click tooltip on, and then we come over here and we hide the page so the user doesn't see it. And then when you hover over it, you get the report. So in my report, we still have that feature. The only thing I cleaned up, his top row wasn't symmetrical and evenly sized. I just changed the size a little bit to stay consistent with how we were doing our new page. But also to this table, I added a drill through, and we mentioned that earlier. So if I'm in United Kingdom, for example, and I know that the United Kingdom is kind of a big empire, I can drill through and see more data. I can see provincial data. This is a separate report. Essentially, I just cloned this page, renamed it provincial, and I took the visuals off the right-hand side and put a map over there. Notice the colors. I went with a grayscale background because we have a theme here. If I had dropped a regular map, it would have had a bright blue ocean, which is very dominant in this visual. it takes away from our maroon, gray, and black that we have on the other pages. So if we set this to grayscale, look how that maroon data points, how they pop out. Just the little details to set your report apart. So what I did, like I said, I duplicated this page. I used the same layout over here. It didn't change anything. I took out, well, I shouldn't say I didn't change anything. I took out the country because we clicked on United Kingdom. We don't need to see that again. We are looking at provincial data, which in a hierarchy, like the US, would be states. So we don't want to see United Kingdom here. We want to see the actual provinces. So then I thought, well, what if I walk away and forget which one I'm looking at? Maybe I don't know that Bermuda is part of the United Kingdom. I needed to have United Kingdom somewhere on this page, but not necessarily in taking up space in the columns, because I want this table to be half, the left half of the page, because we used math earlier. So I took it and put it in the title. We're only going to have one country on this drill through every time. So in this title, it's a text box, but I used a title feature. So it's a title of the title. And I could do a function. I said I picked a field value, which is the country. The summarization is going to pick first or last. Doesn't matter to us. We're only looking at one record. So we picked the first country. So if I turn the title off, we're back at the original title, COVID-19 provincial cases. But now it looks like we have a new title that's interactive. So if I pick 7 or 8 of these, I don't have to make 7 or 8 different pages for each one. I have some variability there. Next level. Also, we're looking at the map. I thought, hey, it'd be a great idea to put that in the title of the map. But look, I have this whole long string, confirmed cases and death for provinces in the United Kingdom. Over here, I could get away with using the title feature because that's going to put it on top of the text box. So how do I do that over here? Well, in this title, we're going to use a DAX feature called map title. Well, we have to do that ahead of time. So I have to go out over where the country is. I created a measure called map title and have this string data. I'm concatenated together, confirmed cases and deaths. I can use the DAX selected value for this field in world population table and grab that. So now every time they come in and choose a different country, this is going to change. Next level, confirmed cases and death for provinces in the United Kingdom. This page is also hidden because it's a drill through. We don't want people to go there because we're picking a certain country and drilling through to it. So anytime you do drill through in Power BI, you're going to get this little arrow. The arrow takes you back. So if we click on the arrow, we go back to our original report. So we could do the same with other. France, same thing, France in the title, both of them. It's good, right? So these are some of the features that really set this apart. Notice if you look, there's all my various tooltips. They're all hidden. We could go across. There's the provincial data. That's hidden as well. Let's see, what else did we do? We go back. He had the company logo, his blog, which is fine. He's releasing this across the world. I'm not a big fan of putting the logo on corporate reports unless you're putting it out to the public. If you forget that you work for Coca-Cola, you might have some issues. Coca-Cola on internal reports. Remember, limited real estate. We need all of that to put visually effective visuals. So this is pretty much everything I wanted to show you. I'm going to take a look at the questions and see. I hope this makes sense. Okay, it doesn't look like we have any questions. I'll wait a few seconds to see if that catches up. I hope this makes sense. I hope feel free, like I said earlier, to reach out, email me your questions, anything that doesn't make sense. I look forward to hearing from you. Any way that I can help you. Oh yeah, another little thing that he did, which is this search visual. This is not in Power BI by default, and it's a nice little add-on. You could choose United. If I have a big table and I want to search through it, that's not available by default in Power BI. Next level, finding visuals that help you tell your story. So we don't have any questions, and I'm just about done. I want to thank you for joining me. Thank you for coming. I hope you've had a great day of learning. I hope you're staying safe and everyone's happy and getting some good learning today. So thank you for joining me. I appreciate it. Let's see, I'll put my contact information up again. Thank you so much. I appreciate it.